Okay, we'll be starting here in just a few minutes, but if you have any questions, there are some blue slips up front to fill out where you can fill out a question, and we'll take those in the order we receive them. Elise up here has them, or Mike Grace, and so you can just fill out that information, and then we'll be able to go through and answer questions in the order we get them. Okay, it is 5 o'clock, and we're going to call this meeting as formed to order. I just want to kind of welcome everybody here tonight. I want to welcome, we do have some of our village board members present tonight here, and they get to kind of sit in the back of the room and just kind of listen tonight. So that's a unique opportunity for them where they're not having to answer all the questions and be under the pressure of the video and everything. We are on televised tonight through OCA Media. We want to thank them for televising that this evening, and we just want to be able to get this started. It's exciting to be able to see this interest in our community. We know there's concern out there over the water and everything, and you know, hopefully you can walk away tonight feeling like, yes, we hear you as residents, and yes, we are as a village board doing something about it. Okay, so I want to just begin by, thanking the panel members that we have here, and I'll just want to go through and give you a little quick bio on each individual here, so kind of understand that we've tried to bring people that kind of have a varying degree and background in what we're dealing with out here, and all of us will be available for questions during the question and answer time. What I intend to happen is about a half hour of some presentation of some materials that we have to talk about what we see going on in the village, what we see regionally going on, and then followed by what we would term a lot of time of just question, answer, and feedback and everything. So to my left, two down, is Jeremy Belusik. Jeremy earned his master's degree from UW-Madison in soil and water engineering in 2003. He's the division manager of the Water Resource Engineering Division at Dane County Land and Water Resources Office. Jeremy has worked closely with the Village of Oregon and private developers in the design and implementation of their stormwater management plans. Jeremy is a valuable resource with his extensive understanding of hydrologic and hydraulic engineering and how it affects communities. Jeremy, like many other people tied to our area and water resources, has committed much of his time over the past 2 years in understanding, addressing ongoing water issues throughout Dane County. To my left, you probably recognize from WKOW Channel 27, is Bob Lindmeyer. Bob has earned his BS degree in meteorology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1979. He started his career in 1980 at Weather Central, a weather consulting firm based in Madison. Through the 1980s, he presented weathercasts in the morning and weekends, and then became the chief meteorologist in 1989, a position he has held ever since. Bob just began, now this may be a little bit old, 38th year?
40th.
40th year, so this was 2 years old, I found on the internet. 40th year at WKOW. Bob believes strongly in climate change education and has given numerous presentations to school, civic, and faith-based groups. He's a member of Citizens Climate Lobby, a nonprofit and nonpartisan organization focused on national policies to address climate change. Bob is a Village of Oregon resident, is married, and has 3 children and 2 grandchildren. On the far end to my left here is Mike Bisbach. Mike Bisbach is a professional engineer with over 29 years of civil and municipal engineering experience. Mike has been the City of Fitchburg City Engineer and Director of Public Works since August of this year. Mike's past experience includes stops at the Illinois DOT, State of Wisconsin DOT and DOA, City of Dodgeville, Jewel Associates Engineers, and an industrial biomass engineering project development company. Mike is also owned and ran a business. Myself, I earned a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of Idaho in 1992. In 1994, I received a master's degree in civil and environmental engineering from Utah State University, specializing in water resources. From 1994 to 2015, I worked in private consulting as a professional licensed engineer specializing in water resource engineering for private and municipal clients. In 2015, I accepted the position as Director of Public Works for the Village of Oregon, where I am reminded every day of the responsibility of keeping our village operating safely, smoothly, and efficiently. To my right is Gary Dish. Gary Dish is the Assistant Public Works Director for the village. Gary has been with the village. We just celebrated his 40th anniversary with the village this last year. Gary has seen it all in the village. He is an incredible asset to me and my staff, and he's here tonight because he has spent a lot of his time over the last couple of years dealing with the water and dealing with situations throughout the village. So that's our panel. We're just going to have to talk about a very brief presentation here, or some brief presentations. I would like to go into, and we'll have everything up on the screens here. Here we go. So when we started, I want to start this by saying in the past 2.5 years, I have just seen an exceptional number of situations dealing with water, stormwater, groundwater, springs, and everything. And in preparation of this evening, I started kind of looking and going through my memory of all the areas within the village that I had dealt with water problems, water situations, and water problems in the village over the past couple years. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. You may look on this map and say, well, what about my home? I called you. And I think I did pretty well going off of my memory. But what you will see in this, and I've outlined the village boundary in yellow. And then each star kind of represents an area that we've dealt with or are dealing with stormwater or water issues, whether it's running sump pumps or just problems that we've experienced in that area. I think when you can see, it's a very interesting pattern as you look at really, obviously, the very low portions of our village and areas that start to rise away from the lower portions of the village. We do not have, at least I personally don't have a record of a lot of issues with water, groundwater, sump pumps, and that type of thing. So I thought this was kind of just interesting. We all acknowledge that portions of Oregon are built and have been built on very low portions of land in the village. And if you go back and you talk to like what we have what we call sometimes the old timers, and they know a lot of information and they share a lot of information, and they'll say, oh, I remember that area, that used to be a swamp. And as we've experienced some drier years, historically drier years, they were able to build on some of those areas. So you can see that our problem areas primarily are in the low-lying areas of the village. One of the largest areas of difficulty that we have had over the last 2 years is what we call Lake Barney and Lake Barney Swamp. It's actually on the old topographic maps. It's shown as Lake Barney is that lake that you see off of County Highway M. And then what they termed Lake Barney Swamp was kind of that area just south of Lake Barney in kind of this Department of Corrections land area out here. And what we started to see, and well, if you've been out our rotary bike trail comes along. It's a great trail. It's a beautiful trail. Unfortunately, it started to be flooded about 1.5 years ago is when we started to experience flooding over the lowest portion of the path. And as we had record water years, that continued to get worse and worse and worse, up until a point where we have approximately 2,000 feet of bike path that are underwater. And that path eventually connects through to Fish Hatchery over here. What we started to observe both in 2018 and repeated in 2019 is as Lake Barney got bigger and bigger, we kept getting more and more water, and Lake Barney kept getting bigger and bigger, and kept flooding more and more of the path. When we look at it, Lake Barney is what we term an internally drained kettle area, and what that really means is that there is no outlet to it. It's basically just consider it as a pan, and that pan will continue to fill with water over many, many years. And as we had dry years and wet years, that area was more wet, more dry, depending on what type of years we had. But if you look at the type of the years we've had in the last 2 to 3, and we'll even show you beyond that, we've had a lot of water, and it just fills up, till eventually overflows at some point. It's like filling a glass of water. It will eventually overtop the glass of water. So as it finally overtopped, all of that water now comes down through the Keller family farm area into the Cusick and Netherwood Park area, and that's where we've experienced the flooding of the ponds, of the roadway and closures and everything like that. But what you can see, this red line here, this whole area is up all the way into city of Fitchburg. This whole tributary area is over 400 or 4,500 acres in size. Lake Barney, which is normally only like 37 acres, has grown to over 370 acres in size. So those are kind of some of the impacts we've seen here. We'll talk a little bit later. I'm not going to talk very long on it now, but we do have some planned improvements coming in 2019 and 2020. Some of those improvements were already done with some dredging that was done along the Oregon branch of the Badfish Creek here, which is shown as letter A. And then planned, we have for 2020 some dredging, some culvert upsizing and improvements over on Netherwood Road. We believe it's not been engineered yet, but we believe we can come up with an engineered solution to make it work. So we can talk a little bit more about those in the future here. This is an interesting exhibit. When we start looking at why is this happening, we start looking, and I'm going to zoom in on these a little bit here. And there's an exhibit board in the back of the room you can take a look at too. But basically, if I zoom in on this, you're going to see that these are graphs, cumulative precipitation based on the Madison rain gauge for 2012. Okay, that's this graph here. On the x-axis, we have the date starting from January 1st through end of January. And then cumulative precipitation, this is from 0 to 40 inches on the scale on the y-axis. The green line represents what is actually observed, and the blue line represents what the average is, and that's an average from 1981 to 2010. So they basically took that time window of period, averaged it, and said that's why it's such a smooth line. So what you can do, and what this is going to show us is as we go through these different years, it's going to kind of show the pattern of what we've been experiencing. In 2012, I went back to just because that's the one year where we actually had a significant below average precipitation. We usually end up with an average of about 34 inches, and this was about 8 inches below average. 2013, we were 11 inches above average. 2014, we were 1 inch above average. 2015, we were 5 inches above average. I like that. When will it stop? So 2016, we were 11 inches above average. 2017, we were 4 inches above average. Are you ready for 2018? We were 16 inches above average. Okay, and 2019, you can see where we're going. If you look at the comparison here of 2017 and 2018 and 2019, we are trending. Right now we're 8 inches plus or minus above average, and we're continuing. Obviously, I had guys out plowing all day today because of the snow we're getting. I saw, and Bob, maybe you confirm this, but I think I saw snowfall to date is 12.9 inches. Somewhere in that?
Before this last snowfall.
Yes.
So we'll have to add this one on.
And average up to date normally is about 1 inch. Okay, so that'll kind of give you an idea of where we are so far this year. So we look at this and we can obviously see patterns. Whenever I look at hydrologic data, I want to look at a long-term pattern of what's happening. And, we look at this. This is a annual precipitation in Madison, Wisconsin. And the neat thing about this is from 1869 to 2018. Okay, so we're talking about an extremely long record that we have. So from 1869 to 2018, the highest ever on record was 1881 at 52.93 inches. According to the data I have here in this, at the end of 2018, we were at 50.8 inches. So for the first time since 1881, we were above 50 inches. Now, there can be outliers where we just have a really, really wet year and we just chalk it up for bad luck. Then there are trends. I believe that we're seeing a trend, and I think when Bob talks, we'll talk about that too. So I'm going to move on pretty quickly here. But like I say, for the past 70 years, this red line represents a fairly statistically significant trend in increasing precipitation in the Madison area. And I'm using Madison data because it's the longest set of data we have. We don't have weather recording stations that have that kind of record in Oregon. This is another interesting slide that just says number of days with 1 inch or more precipitation in Madison, Wisconsin. And you can just see this pattern here of increase. Not only are we seeing an increase in the amount of precipitation, we're seeing an increase in the severity and the frequency of what we're getting that precipitation. And then lastly, this is something that, Jeremy, I don't know, do you want to talk about this one or put him on the spot? This comes out of Dane County, so I don't want to steal your thunder, but
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
well, this was something that Joe Parisi's office, it actually came out of Dane County through Joe Parisi's office and everything, which said, obviously you can see this annual precipitation trend we were talking about. But I think what's really interesting here is when you look at groundwater trends. Okay, and a lot of times what we're talking about when we're talking about sump water, and we're talking about situations and dealing with basements, flooding, and everything like that, we're really talking about groundwater, higher groundwater, and areas that basements that maybe not had flooded before are all of a sudden flooding now. And so what you can see here, groundwater trend in 2019, we're talking at depth to groundwater at this location in Middleton was 35 feet, whereas in previous years was down to 55, 60 feet, below ground surface. Madison, which now mind you, this Middleton is likely skewed because we had almost 12, 14 inches in one evening, which was like a 10,000 year event last year for Cross Plains, and that in the August. Was that 19th and 20th of 2018. However, Madison did not receive that brunt of that, but you can still see this very, very strong trend in groundwater. So that's the conclusion of what I want to talk about. We want to talk obviously about your projects. We'll hear from Bob Lindmeyer here next, but following his presentation, we really want to then hear from you and go into your questions and answers.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Get on this here.
I want to come at this from a more long-term perspective, from a climate change perspective, because I will pose to you that this is the new normal because of climate change that we'll be dealing with going into the future, what Jeff showed you. But we do have to distinguish between weather and climate. The weather that we've had for the past couple of weeks, unusually cold. This is our 15th consecutive day with a below average temperature. And for many of those days, of course, much below average. And as Jeff also mentioned, we're on a record pace for snowfall accumulation. But this is weather. This is short term. This is a depiction of global temperatures over the northern hemisphere from earlier today. And it just shows this cold air intrusion coming down from the Arctic through Canada and into the northern United States. But it's just due to an unusually persistent upper air pattern that's been just stuck in neutral, and we've had waves of Arctic air coming our way. It looks like we're going to have to deal with this for about another week before we do break out of it. But this is weather and not climate, just to be clear on that. One of the main things I want to convey to you are these 3 points. Extreme events are becoming more frequent and extreme. They're more extreme because the climate is warming unnaturally. This unnatural warming is because humans are burning fossil fuels. In the scientific world that I live in, and again, I'm a scientist, I'm a meteorologist that happens to do his work on television, but in my research with what the climate scientists are saying, the peer-reviewed research, it's that climate change is real, it's us doing it, it's dangerous. Scientists agree, But we do have solutions still out there that are technically feasible, economically affordable, and politically viable. And this statistic has been used for a while now. It seems to be a point of dispute with some people, but I'm very confident in saying this, that 97% of climate scientists have concluded that human-caused climate change is happening. And this is one reason I'm talking about the new normal, how long the greenhouse gases stay in the atmosphere once they're put there. Methane is in the atmosphere about 10 years. Nitrous oxide, 100 years. Carbon dioxide, over 1,000 years. So every time we reach a new atmospheric concentration in carbon dioxide, this is our new normal, unless we can figure out some way to extract. Climate scientists have been able to do ice core drillings in the Antarctic, doing ice core drills 2 miles into the ice. And that represents an extraction of 800,000 years of data. Every year, from those ice cores, they can extract air bubbles, which have the air chemistry from that particular year. So they have a high confidence of what our atmosphere has done in terms of atmospheric chemistry for 800,000 years. It gives us a big window to see trends. And it does show how for almost that entire time period, we were bouncing between 200 and 300 parts per million. That's what the vertical scale represents. But you can see how we've dramatically climbed in terms of atmospheric concentration in a very short period of time. And the reason the atmospheric concentration has climbed is because of burning fossil fuels, burning coal, consuming oil. Since the start of the Industrial Revolution, which that red shading represents, that's when we've seen this climb in the concentration of those greenhouse gases. So in the scientific world that I live in, there's no question that the greenhouse gas concentrations are increasing dramatically. And the reason that they're increasing is because of humans burning fossil fuels. And this is the end result of that burning of fossil fuels is a climb in our atmospheric global temperature. So this represents from 1880, which is as far back as climate scientists can look at and reliably say this is what our average annual temperature was year to year. And you can see the trend. Now it bounces all over the place because there's a natural variation year to year, but especially you can see where the curve really starts to curve up. That's in the 1950s. Since the 1950s, it's gone from more of a linear increase to an exponential increase. And so that's the big concern. Now some people will say it's due to just natural variation, the reason that we're climbing. The reason that our climate has changed in the past was because of changes in sunlight intensity, both over long periods of time. And that's what's caused our climate to change. However, since the 1950s, sunlight intensity has been slowly decreasing. So the driver is not sunlight. It is, in fact, due to us burning fossil fuels.
I would note that the time frame there is back as far as we have for the city of Madison data, 1881. So
matches up nicely.
Exactly.
And I'll say one more thing. You can see the vertical scale says a 1 degree increase in Celsius, which is 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Now you might think, well, what's a big deal about 1 degree? The last time we were in an ice age here, when we had an ice sheet a mile thick overhead, it was 6 degrees colder, the average global temperature from what it is right now. So these 1 degree increments are a big deal that are happening. And the trend continues to go up. The last 5 years have been the hottest on record globally since 1880. And the way that 2019 is trending, it'll also be there as well. Now you might say, well, here in Oregon, we haven't been seeing that kind of warmth, and that's true. We've been seeing the rain, but not the heat. But you have to look at things from a global scale. And from the 2018 global scale, you can see a lot of red to dark red, representing much warmer to record warmest. We were in white, so we were near normal. But when you look at the global perspective, it has been a near record-setting year in 2018. And when you look at it more locally, Madison, Oregon are climatically almost identical. We're ahead of the curve in terms of global warming. Again, 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit is the national, or is the worldwide number, but we're at 3 degrees warmer since 1970, which is again where the curve has really been going exponential. Wisconsin's 2.7, we're above the national average of 2.5. Why is that? We're closer to the Arctic, which is dramatically warming.
This is C or F?
This is Fahrenheit.
Thank you.
Yeah. And just to put this in a little bit more perspective, in terms of records, record cold days, record warm days, back in the 1950s is where you see the blue spike there, when we had record cold. But you can see what's been happening since the 1950s. We're seeing more and more record warm days, and record cold days are pretty unusual. Even having said that, it looks like tonight we're going to have a record cold night. But, you know, we do have record cold, just not as frequently as we have record warmth. So that warmth is showing itself in increased precipitation. Every 1 degree C increase in atmospheric global temperature means that there's 4% more water vapor in the atmosphere from the oceans evaporating, which are warmer, more moisture. So we have a 4% increase in atmospheric moisture, and that's showing itself in these precipitation events. So this is 1% extremes, okay, the 1%. Since 1955, 58, that's how much it's increased here in the upper Midwest, a 42% increase during that time frame. So you can see it's a regional thing. It's just not here. It's covering much of the north central and northeast United States. And 2018, not only record moisture here, record amount of rainfall and snow, but it was common, top 10 and wettest on records, concentrated through the upper Midwest, but also through the eastern United States. This is a national phenomenon that we're seeing. And of course, last year we had the all-time wettest 24-hour total here in southern Wisconsin and western Dane County. It was Doppler estimated to be right around 15 inches. It's never been an official record because the National Weather Service couldn't find a rain gauge that fit their fit what they want in terms of exactness. But we're confident. The old record was a little over 11 inches, so it was smashed. So that just gives you another example of these extreme rainfall events that we're seeing. And we'll delve on this because Jeff showed this, but again, you can see how this last year was almost the same as the previous wettest, all-time wettest, which was 1881, but way above average. But here we are, another year of near record moisture. Rainfall trends, again, you can see this is Madison, okay? This is locally here, how much we've seen an increase in rainfall days of a ½ inch, 1 inch, and 2 inches. As our atmosphere's warm, this is since 1950, we're seeing this additional moisture in the atmosphere show itself as these more frequent heavy rainfall events. And another way to look at that is the wettest day each year. Since 1950, the wettest day on average was about 2.3 inches. Now you can see that graph is bouncing all over the place. Year to year, it varies dramatically. But the trend line is showing that it's almost a ½ inch more now as of 2018, which is a big deal for infrastructure when they're planning planning road design and other things. Another ½ inch really can affect things dramatically. And this is why we're seeing all these flooding events as well. Extreme rainfall events, catastrophic rainfall events are becoming more frequent because of that. Now the question is, where do we go from here? The red line, and this, you can see that this is going through 2100 through the rest of the century. The vertical line is, that's the average global temperature, which is again now at 1 degree. It looks like we'll be going to 1.5 somewhere between 2025 and 2030. Where we go from here through the rest of the century all depends on man and how fast we can get out of our consumption of fossil fuels. The green line represents extreme emission cuts to keep it below 2 degrees. The red line is business as usual. And that is where we could be going. We could be as warm as 5 degrees above that pre-industrial average, 5 degrees warmer. And keep in mind when I said the last ice age happened when it was 6 degrees colder. So you can imagine what 5 degrees will do. And we're going to be seeing this show itself as more heat index days above 105 degrees by just mid-century, not that far from now, will be projected to have on average 21 days with a heat index of 105 degrees or above. That's one example of what that business as usual trend line will show. Top hazards, current and by 2050. There's no numbers on this to kind of give you an idea of the 5 different climate hazards that we deal with here in southern Wisconsin: warming, drought, precipitation, water deficit, and heat waves. But by 2050, they'll all be a higher classification of hazard. Yeah. But if we can do intensity under deep emission cuts, the red line is from the previous graph, but the light pink shows how we can bring them all back, and it won't be as bad in terms of warming, drought, precipitation, water deficit, and heat waves. They're all going to increase, okay, because the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is going to continue to warm our atmosphere. It's going to get worse, but we can make it from becoming catastrophically worse. And this kind of thing, I think, puts it in perspective. If we follow business as usual, that red line going up about 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius, that's 11.5 degrees hotter by the end of the century. So that'll give Madison the climate that's currently resides in Alexandria, Louisiana. So big changes are needed. We do need to dramatically reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emission that's taking place. And these are the changes that we need to see happen if we're going to keep it to 1.5 degrees C, another half degree. We got our work cut out. This is my last slide, just saying what we need to do in the future. Replace fossil fuels with renewable energy at a very fast rate, much faster than we're doing now. And we can do that by putting a price on carbon. I think that's key for us getting us out of the mess that we're in. We have to develop mitigation strategies, including figuring out ways to extract carbon dioxide, because I'm afraid we're going to have to do that to keep it from getting more out of control. We can all do what we can to reduce our carbon footprint, and the village has been doing a fantastic job on that. By the way, I'm very proud of our village in what we've been doing in the school district here, and what future plans are. It's A1. But we have to develop adaptive strategies. And I think that's one thing I want to really leave you with here, is that this is a new normal. So when we're planning infrastructure going into the future, when we have these discussions, keep in mind that what we're experiencing, it's not going to get much better. That doesn't mean droughts aren't going to happen. They will. We're still going to have droughts, but they're not going to be as common. We're going to see these rainfall events as the more common thing. Fulfill international agreements, yeah, it has to be a worldwide thing.
Great. Thank you, Bob.
Yep.
Thank you very much for that. It's extremely informative and kind of gives us more on a global scale of where we are. I want to ask Jeremy Belusik if you might just kind of, with Dane County Land and Water Resources, if you would just kind of share kind of what you've experienced in the last 2 to 3 years in your job. You've been with Dane County Land and Water Resources for quite a while. Mm-hmm. And what have you seen regionally?
Well, obviously Oregon's not alone. This has been happening countywide, statewide, regionally. A couple of trends that we've kind of been seeing is, as Bob mentioned, we're getting increased precipitation. But the other thing that's happening is it's the way we're getting it is changing. We're getting shorter, higher intensity storm events, And basically, a lot of our stormwater infrastructure is getting beat by that. So, you know, when we design things, we design them over a rainfall event over a 24-hour period. But if we get that in 30 minutes instead of 24 hours, that's going to exceed our capacity to handle it. So that's one of the reasons we're seeing a lot of flooding issues. The other one is the cumulative volume of rainfall that has been increasing every year. Jeff showed you the chart about groundwater levels. One of the things that I've seen since the beginning of my career at the county to now is a huge increase in groundwater flooding, which is the groundwater coming up to the point where now it's starting to get into basements. Springs that have never discharged before are starting to pop out of the side of hills. People that are even living on hillsides are starting to get water in their basements because water's coming down through the soil, finding a spot to come out the side, and we're getting a lot of flooding countywide that way. Kind of just an anecdotal or a different way to look at it. Our department also manages the Madison or the Yahara chain of lakes, and we operate 3 dams. 2 of them have been open, wide open, the locks, the dams, since April of 2016. So we have no control over the river on that reach right now. So yeah, things are changing. We're dealing with them. Obviously, we're very busy. One of the things that we've been looking at in our department is that, you know, we're looking at the Madison Gauge at the airport, but we are also looking at all the private weather stations that are around the county, and we find that it's the rainfall depth after a storm event is very, very spatially driven. Middleton in August of 2018 got 15 inches, but the airport I think only got like 4, right? That's right. So that's only a matter of miles, and if that storm had dropped over Lake Mendota instead of over western Dane County, it would have been even a bigger catastrophe. So we're doing all we can to try to advance our science. We're looking at different ways to do the modeling for our computer modeling on how we design stormwater infrastructure, trying to update it. Currently, we're using things that are an average of all the way back to 1940. And as you saw in some of those curves up there, things really started to change in the 70s, but it's kind of being dampened out by that older data right now. So we're trying to push the envelope and get more modern data, use better models to predict how we can manage runoff and try to protect property.
That's great. Great, thank you. And lastly, just Mike, I want to, Mike Bisbach, who, I don't want to put you in the spot because I know that Mike has been in this job since August, so he knows everything about Fitchburg. But no, you know, Fitchburg has been dealing with Lake Barney as well and dealing with residents. And if you might just take 2 minutes and kind of explain where you see the city of Fitchburg being involved in the next couple of years, both with the engineering and possible capital improvement projects.
Sure. I would start by saying Fitchburg's really no different than any other communities in Dane County. We do have a lot of kettles. Lake Barney is one. And one of the things that's really causing some problems in these kettles is the high groundwater is taking the original flooding capacity of those kettles and diminishing it because they're already full of water because of the groundwater increasing. And that's kind of what has happened with Lake Barney to some extent, besides having the enormous rainfall events. And specifically Lake Barney is a really good example of showing that it really is rainfall driven. Because if you look at the entire watershed of Lake Barney and you look at a pre versus post development picture, there's been really no new development in Lake Barney since we've seen Lake Barney grow from 37 acres to 137 acres. So
337.
Or 337 acres. So it's really driven by rainfall and groundwater. It's not driven by development, and I think that really drives home the fact that it's climate, it's rainfall events. Again, it's the intensity of rainfall events, and then this water going to the groundwater isn't having a chance to percolate out, and the groundwater's high. So the kettles are already full, and that happens even with developed areas in their stormwater ponds. They're constantly full of water before we have one of these events. So when we get a storm event, there's no capacity in there to dampen that storm event as they were designed for. So these back-to-back storm events are really diminishing the capacity of our infrastructure.
And you have an engineering RFP out, correct, right now?
Correct. We're going to start a study on Lake Barney in 2020. We have So we've got 3 years of basically preliminary engineering, and then right now the capital improvements plan is for construction in 2023. That's always subject to change. It could get moved up or get moved back based on, what our city council wants to do. But we are going to have an RFP out for starting to study Lake Barney this next year.
And looking at alternatives of what could be done with the water levels in Lake Barney and maybe more of a proactive management of that area.
Correct, and our intent is to involve Oregon because eventually our water goes through the village of Oregon, so we need to be in concert with Oregon so that what we do doesn't have negative impacts in Oregon and that we're playing on the same playbook.
We called Oregon and asked them to come and get their water, and they said, no, they're good. No, we didn't do that, but I'm always amazed when someone says, well, it's not our water, and it's like, well, the water flows downhill, and if you're the next neighbor downhill, and unfortunately, it's something you need to deal with, and you get to deal with and everything. So, well, that's great, and I hope you kind of see some of the I hope you can see the collective work that is going on, as well as hopefully some of the knowledge and research that has been done to kind of get us to this point. I think we've seen a lot of this information. So I want to kind of just open it up right now and we kind of answer a few questions, and I'm sure those will go on with other questions. Just a second. And what we have is we're going to go through these questions. If you'd like to ask a question, please fill out a blue form. Elise Cruz, where she just left the. Okay, Elise Cruz. First of all, I would like to introduce to you Elise Cruz. Elise is the newest member of the village staff. She is the planning director and for the village, and this is our first full-time planner that we have ever had in the village. She started 2 weeks ago. She's hit the ground running, and she's doing a great job. So as you know, working with planning and zoning and development and everything, we'll be working with Elise in the future. So, but she's going to kind of help facilitate. So if there's questions that will be answered or asked from the audience, she has a microphone. And the reason we just want a microphone is just so that the Oregon Cable Access can be able to hear that, and those that are watching out on the TV can hear that as well. So, all right, so first question is, what is a reservoir, and could making Badfish Creek more drainage, is what it says. But I believe the question would really be is can we improve Badfish Creek to help improve drainage? A reservoir, do you want to, Jeremy, why don't you answer, what is a reservoir?
Well, quite simply, a reservoir is just an area that holds water. So I'm not sure what it was in reference to, but
yeah, and maybe describe maybe more of also, what is a kettle, and how does that differ from, say, like a lake or something like that?
well, a kettle is a glacial feature. Basically, a chunk of ice was embedded in the soil that the glaciers left behind. It melted, and then that soil collapsed. So now there's a hole basically in the ground, like a pothole. And there's no natural outlet usually. Water that gets into it either infiltrates into the ground further or it evaporates, and basically no other outlet. Since Oregon, Verona, up towards Cross Plains, Mount Horeb are all on the end of the glacier where it becomes glaciated to unglaciated. So if you think like Mount Horeb, Blue Mounds, unglaciated, Verona, Oregon, glaciated, we have a lot of those potholes in this area of Fitchburg as well. So this part of the county has a lot of internally drained areas, and Village of Oregon has numerous kettles around the village.
Great. So the second part of this question is, and can we improve drainage in the Badfish Creek area, I believe? And is Royce, am I getting that pretty close? Okay, good. I just want to make sure I was answering your question. So, yes, the answer is yes. And in 2018, in working with residents along Jefferson Street, along there, we looked at the Badfish Creek as it goes through there. We did a lot of research and found that it was part of, I know that the residents found this too, that it was part of a drainage district. And so the village board funded a dredging project of Badfish Creek, and that was from the railroad crossing the railroad tunnel all the way up to where it goes into Keller Alpine Meadows Park up there. And if you kind of see this one photo here, which is, this is a picture showing the post dredging of that creek area. I could show you pre pictures of that. I don't have them queued up here, but basically, if you can imagine this almost totally silted in certain areas, filled with cattails and that type of thing. I mean, there were portions of the creek that were really operating very well, but some areas were not. And so this was a dredging project of about a half mile. And just if you look at the exhibit here, I have it labeled as A. Just for reference, we are right here at the bottom almost of the village of Oregon. This is Quick Trip right here, and then this is the train tracks. And so the dredging began all the way along here. This is South Burr Oak right here where the letter A is, all the way up to the park area up here. And that was done in 2019, and that was funded by the Village of Oregon entirely. But we did that in working with the Dane County Drainage District, Oregon branch of the Dane County Drainage District. Yes?
We live right about where the A is,
Yes.
and our our pump, after you did
The dredging?
dredging,
Yes.
dropped. Seriously, timed that it was pumping.
In a good way or a bad way?
Good.
Okay, good.
So that's.
Elise, do you
why
want to get the
I'm
microphone for
asking
him?
that
Sorry.
question.
Yes.
Can we do more of the Bad Creek
Yes,
Dredging further east?
Well, we've
That
actually,
goes outside of Oregon, I know, but
right. Well, actually, the Badfish Creek, the actual entrance of Badfish Creek, the true beginning of Badfish Creek is really right here. It does not, Badfish Creek on any map or anything like that does not really extend up into Alpine Meadows subdivision. It's just a tributary area to Badfish Creek. But as a creek, this is pretty much the headwaters of Badfish Creek, with the exception of all the area that is this area here I'm highlighting, which is known as Lerner Park and also DiMaggio, thank you, DiMaggio Park. A lot of people don't realize we have a park back here called DiMaggio Park, but it's our aquatic park right now. But that's just a fancy term for us saying that it's flooded, I guess. But our plan, just so you can, Royce, our plan is actually that we would be doing in 2020 a dredging project with the Drainage District from this point all the way up to the Netherwood Road area. They'll have to be engineered to determine the best location of that. But one of the biggest challenges that we face right now is all of this water. This, as Jeremy was talking about, is a kettle, a pothole, whatever we want to call it. And when it eventually overflows, it eventually overflowed, and it overflowed right at this letter F here. And then you can see this is farm ground. This has not been a drainage way for many, many years. And it has flowed right down through here. And if you've driven out to Cusick Parkway and Netherwood, you'll see this huge lake out here. That's all coming from Lake Barney. And then it has two choices. It can either go through a small culvert at C and then into the pond system, or it can go down here and then eventually over the roadway if it floods high enough, and then down here into Keller Alpine Park. One of the biggest challenges we have is this whole area where we see B, E, D, all of these letters here is part of the original drainage district that, to the best of any of our knowledge, has had nothing done with it in probably over 100 years. I think the last project we saw on it was 1918 that we found any record of, and from that time forward, absolutely nothing had been done. And so our goal is to try to improve the conveyance to be able to get water through this area much more efficiently, quickly, and be able to get that through and out of the village. And Royce, I do think, if we're not, right now, as the water now comes right where D is, comes under this culvert right near Josh Belo's house, if you know where that is, and that where he's got the flooded driveways and everything. It has no real place to go, and so it just soaks into the ground there. I firmly believe that if we can get water out of there and down and into Badfish Creek and out quicker, I think it will help overall. I don't think it'll do much, though, to your area there from a groundwater perspective.
I'd be a little frightened with more water coming down.
People are, well, I will say this, the water's coming down there now. And, so the key is to be able to get it through there more efficiently, quickly, and out of there to where we're not basically topping off the tank on the groundwater side of things. That answer your question pretty well? Okay, thank you. Okay, question is, have stormwater utility fees using property taxes? And, I probably will defer to Jeremy a little bit on this. How much involvement have you had with stormwater utilities?
Fair amount.
Okay, yeah. A stormwater utility is basically something that is set up in a community, in a municipality, and it's strictly for addressing stormwater matters, okay? Under expenditure restraint and other things that have been put in place by the legislature, it was getting harder and harder to generate funds for something like stormwater. So many communities formed a stormwater utility, correct? Mm-hmm. And those stormwater utilities could charge additional fees for stormwater projects, and that was based off of a residential unit.
Yeah, most of them are based off of, in one way, shape, form, or another, based off how much runoff would come off of your property. So a residential home would pay a certain amount. If you had a large commercial project, you'd pay a whole lot more. And basically, the law says it's got to be equal. So whatever you would contribute is based off of how much runoff you would have. It's run like any other utility, like your water bill, where you use a certain amount of water, you pay for that. You create a certain amount of runoff, you would pay for that. And the city of Fitchburg actually has a utility, so I'll let Mike expand.
Yeah, we have a utility. So currently, our study for Lake Barney will be funded out of the utility rates, and it is just like a water or sewer utility. Basically, the rates can only fund stormwater projects, and they have to be specific improvements. We also have, because Fitchburg has a lot of rural area, we have two different areas. We have an urban service area and a non-urban service area, and the rates are based on that. And forgive me, I don't know what our rates are off the top of my head, but we do have a utility, and it helps us fund stormwater improvement projects. And it's been a good thing, I think, overall. It can be tough at first. I wasn't there when it was approved, so I didn't have to go through that. But it has been a valuable tool, especially trying to fight with this increase of runoff and trying to solve some of the flooding issues that we have.
And I would just add that I believe the vast majority of the communities in Dane County do have a stormwater utility.
So the question out there, the obvious question is, why doesn't Village of Oregon have a stormwater utility? Part of it is we were a little late to the game. The legislature kind of closed a door on us for stormwater utilities. It used to be that a community could create a stormwater utility and actually increase the amount that it was collecting from residents without it affecting your tax expenditure restraint or tax levy, excuse me, the tax levy. So if we generated, say, $100,000 from a stormwater utility from our residents, we'd actually have to reduce the tax levy by $100,000 so that the net overall was zero. So we have not adopted a stormwater utility strictly from the standpoint that, number one, it can be costly to generate or to set one of those up, and then number two, there's no net benefit. It's actually a net loss for us money-wise because of how much it would take to set it up and run it. So, comment in there.
As a follow-up to my question, even the legislative problem, which was recently created, you got to look at as temporary. So you can incrementally move towards a utility and be prepared for when a more practical legislature is elected. Secondly, even if you funded it with property tax, it would be an off-budget levy. And even though it is included in your combined levy, for the purposes of expenditure restraint, it's not reported as part of your operating budget. And therefore, there is a financial benefit, even if it's funded with the property tax.
Okay.
If you look at it. So
Okay.
I'll just
We'll have
point
to,
that
yeah,
out.
we'll talk to our engineers about that and get a little more information on it. But yeah, okay, that's good information. Thank you.
The other thing is that utilities are looked at as applying the tax, the levy, whatever, more equitably. Large producers of runoff would pay more. Currently, property tax isn't spread out that way. Like churches, for example, don't pay property tax or limited, and they would have to pay in a utility. So that's the other advantage of having a utility over property tax levy.
That's great questions. Okay. The next question, this is from Karen. Thank you. And has all the development west of Oregon affected water/rain issues into Jefferson and the Burr Oak Avenue? And I think an excellent answer could come from Jeremy. And I want to tell you this as I know no one else in this room that has done more research on the Bergamot Development and that whole area than Jeremy, who kind of had to completely reevaluate that whole area. Was it 6 years ago?
At least, yeah.
6 or 7 years ago. So, so has the development like Bergamot, Alpine Meadows, Oregon Parks, how has that contributed in a negative way towards what we're seeing in the Jefferson area, which is all this downtown right along here?
Well, the short answer is that it shouldn't. Those areas were developed under modern stormwater ordinances where we do control for the amount of runoff that comes off of them and obviously the water quality as well. Some of that is challenging though. It requires management, it requires maintenance, and I can't speak to that, but the design is that it would not affect that area. That's what we shoot for when we require stormwater management plans when development occurs.
Yeah, I believe, and this is from an engineer's perspective, when development occurs, the philosophy is, or the thought out there is that they see all these rooftops and they see these roadways going in and these highly impervious surfaces going in what used to be farm fields. And you're exactly right in saying that the amount of runoff coming off of that area is significantly increases with development. Okay, the amount and the intensity of which it comes off of. But in the past, say 25 years, 25, 30 years, we've really ratcheted down the development ordinances that are extremely restrictive on what type of flows can come out of these developments. Just as for the Village of Oregon, we make them study the pre and post development runoff rates for a 2, 10, and 100-year event. Okay, and you have to actually reduce the 10-year post-development to the 2-year pre-development rates, as well as the 100 to the 10. So what that means, and quite honestly in just layman terms, is after that development is built, the peak flow off of that in a 100-year event would look like what it looked like for a 10-year event before it was developed. Now, what it doesn't say in all of that is that over time, you're going to get more water. It's impervious surfaces. So what these ponds do is they stage up. The water will run into them out of all the storm sewers. They stage up, and they have outlet structures that have been designed used through computer modeling, and they have different openings in them that operate at different levels, and they help to restrict the amount of water leaving the ponds, and that stretches that out over a long time period. And that's how you're able to reduce these peak flows. So you get more water over time. That's just the way development works. You have more impervious area than a farm field. However, it's much less intense.
Right. In addition, when I mentioned the modern stormwater ordinances, one of the main things that has changed recently in the last 20 years is that we require stormwater infiltration. So not only holding on to the water in these ponds and then slowly releasing them, but actually requiring that a significant amount of the precipitation be infiltrated back into the ground. So the developments on the west side of the village have all been developed at a time when that was a requirement. So not only are we holding onto the water and releasing it slowly, but we're actually putting the water back in the ground. And it's very close to what the pre-development infiltration would have been. So both those things are happening.
Which in a year when we have a tremendous amount of precipitation, infiltration may not necessarily be the best thing, but it's what we, in the long term, that's what we want to see. I came from an area out west that was groundwater levels were dropping at an alarming rate, and people were so concerned about the amount of water. We try to figure out how to get rid of water. Out west, they're trying to figure out, well, how do we get more water? So it's just a whole different spectrum of problems, I guess. Karen, was that answer your question pretty well?
Well, I think so. I'm just looking back. I'm not recalling how many years that was that all those houses on Florida Avenue had to be taken out, and the one on Burr Oak, I don't know, was that about 15 years ago?
2008 and 2007, 2008, yeah. So I want to show you, actually, this is kind of an interesting, so this is what we call our graphical information system, or short for it's a GIS system. Oh, come on. Okay. Hang on here. I'm going to let it catch up. Okay, so this is this is North Burr Oak, this is South Burr Oak, and then this is what used to be Florida Avenue. If you've lived here long enough, and I've lived here in the village for 15 years, you remember that there were about 7 homes right along here. And this right here is the Oregon branch of the Badfish Creek. I'm going to turn on something here. I'm going to turn on the, there we go. I'm going to turn on the floodplain. And the floodplain is going to come along and show you kind of what we're dealing with, what we were dealing with there. It's not, hopefully it doesn't make a liar out of me. Isn't that impressive, everybody? If it were working, it would show a floodplain that actually comes right up to the back of those lots along that whole area. It would show a floodplain that really is the backyard of a lot of these Jefferson properties and all along there. Let me see if I can maybe.
Jeff, can you zoom in? You're at too far a scale.
Let me do something here. Let me turn off this. Zoom in or zoom out?
Zoom in. The national flood layer doesn't show up if you zoom out too far.
It's worked in the past.
Try zooming in.
This is Oregon during the snowstorm last night that we had. Okay, so we'll move on. But basically, those homes were in a FEMA delineated floodplain. How that was ever permitted back there, I have no idea. It was definitely not a good idea, and I think the village, we're still paying on the notes on buying those homes out, but it was the right thing to do at the time. And anyone, I mean, we couldn't even get in there this summer to mow. It was so wet. There was only.
That's why it hasn't been mowed then?
Yes, yeah,
Thank you for that.
yes, yeah. We tried. I think we got mowers in one small portions, and we had to pull them out. So yeah, no, we normally would like to mow that, but it was.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it was just totally wet. So okay. All right. So this next question is: has there been any discussion about stopping building on marshlands? Yes. Yeah. Excellent question. And the answer to that is yes. We are not going. Luckily there are enough things in place that prevent from the construction within marshlands. Now, you might want to say, well, you built your bike path in a marshland, and that's a very good point. I don't have a great argument for that, other than when that was built, there were people that had said, you know, in the 40-plus years they had lived there, they had never seen water anywhere near that area, and now it's under 24 inches of water. You know, there's a resident out off of County Highway M that has had a beautiful home out there and shop and wonderful property, and it's been flooded for the first time ever. You know, there's some pictures. You've probably been out along M and you've seen, here I'm getting emails. If you've seen some things, you've seen some actual, they call them water bladders that are around the house, and actually water-filled dams that actually circle the house, and in constant pumping to be able to pump on the other side of those. So yes, the answer is definitely, you know, nowadays a lot of these areas that are developed probably would not be permitted to be developed. And one of the things that I will tell you, a commitment from myself and our engineers as we look at new development, you know, if we were looking at a development in a questionable area that we felt had higher groundwater potential, first of all, we would either be limiting that there would be no basements, or we would be requiring the developer to install actual stormwater collection pipes that people could tie sumps into. Because that's one of the other big problems we have is the sump water has to go somewhere, and if it goes in the yard, it soaks the yard, and then it goes down onto the sidewalk, and it creates a mossy sidewalk, and it creates a ice flow in the middle of winter. Then it goes out to the gutters, and we've had a situation out on Waterman Street, or on Park Street before, where we had 6-8 inches of ice just overnight from a really cold snap of water. So I think it was that 2 years ago where we had to clean that out, Gary? Yeah. So, and we can do that. It's just not, fun, and it's not effective use of our time and our equipment and everything. So, yes, we are, the last couple of years have really increased our awareness of certain problems. Now, where the majority of development is occurring, such as forward development, new phases of Bergamot, the Oregon Parks, Cassandra Way neighborhood up there, those are all higher ground areas. And if you remember from that exhibit I had at the very beginning, they're not areas that we have had any kind of problems. If you look at the areas of development in the past, say 20, 25 years, the only areas of new development that have really had problems are down in this area of Edenbury. And now, okay, this is the name of the street, Marsh Court. Okay, so again, you know, that's something that at the time probably should have been given a little more thought. And so, okay. Maybe this next one was just registered as being here, so there's no question on that one. Okay, this is Kim Smith would like to speak. So, where is Kim?
Hi.
Hi, Kim.
How are you doing?
You don't have to stand, but you can if you would like. Okay.
I feel like I'm behind him. So, we live, my husband and I. You can stand up, dear. Throw me in the bus here. So we live at Edenbury Lane.
Yes.
Yeah, do you know where that is in the, yep,
right
perfect.
Here, where
so
my
we're
red dots
actually
are.
up a little bit there, and we've got an electrical box outside, or actually in our yard. And so what happened was this TDS came through, destroyed our yard and the condo in back of us. And so the water pools there. What can we do? Or is there anything that you can do?
Yes.
Fantastic.
You can send me an email.
Okay.
And I pass it on. We have really good. Just what I need is more email. I think.
Right.
But no, you can send me an email, and I will pass that request and on to our TDS representatives that we've been working with for the past couple of years.
Okay.
And I've had really good luck with them responding and correcting items such as that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Is there something that we can do to grade our lawn to stop the pooling of the water? We actually don't have issues unless it is that torrential rain.
Correct,
If it's a
yeah.
slow rain, we're fine. The sump pump goes, we're fine. but it's when it's that torrential rain. Is there something that we can do? Is there a drain?
And you back right up against
Yeah.
the large drainage swale that comes down off the hill, correct?
Yes.
You back up. So
Yeah.
every couple times a year you get a river in your backyard, right?
Yep.
Or kind of not in your backyard, but beyond your backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can, and that's, we always advocate, I think a good takeaway from this is the village is working hard, but we also are dealing with a lot of private property. And there are things that private homeowners can do to help in those situations.
Yeah.
Some of it's grading around buildings, some of it's adding French drains on their property, that type of thing.
Okay.
So, yes, you can do
Because
that.
we want to work with you.
Correct.
In the process.
Yep.
So.
We're happy to work with folks that are working with stuff like that. As always, there are buried utilities. You don't want to be
Right.
digging without getting those located and everything like that. But
Okay.
yep, a lot of these red stars that are on here are individuals I've worked with or talked with or dealt with, in some very similar situations.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Next question is, can we establish a deep lake? And John, if you wouldn't mind, let's see, or you wish to speak? Here, John. Okay, John, Lisa will bring back a microphone.
Thank you. The solutions that you've been talking about seem like they are aimed at problems that we have today. And Bob's presentation indicated that these problems are just going to get a lot worse. And so my concern is we should also be looking at long-term kinds of problem solving. And these seem like they're more just what we can do today. Now, basically, it seems like the problem is that the groundwater is getting higher and higher, and it's flooding the areas that are lower than where the groundwater's height actually is. And water flows underground, so it's causing all of these problems. And it has really no place to go. And it's going to be worse and worse as we go on and on. So the only thought was, we went to the Summer Palace in China, and there is this huge mountain, and in front of it is this huge lake. And I was informed that that lake was created by making the mountain. And so if we had a large lake someplace that would be able to take the increased amounts of water that we're getting in the future, maybe that's a radical solution that we maybe should think about.
Jeremy, do you want to talk a little bit about one of the things that I know Joe Parisi's office is in moving forward with the dredging projects? Do you know much about those?
Yeah, it doesn't really.
It's not going to help too much for storage, but yeah.
Well, basically, you talk about creating a lake. Our stormwater ponds are basically doing exactly the same thing. Maybe not, obviously not to the scale of the one that you witnessed in China, but they can be all different sizes. And we do have very large stormwater basins that help with flood control. Jeff wanted me to touch on one of the projects that we're actually completing. We're going to start on this spring, and that is to remove sediment out of the Yahara River. We've done a bunch of computer modeling and have figured out that we can dramatically increase flow in the Yahara River, which helps drain the whole basin, if we can remove some specific locations of sediment that are causing restrictions. So we're actually, we just accepted, did we accept the bid, Teresa? Teresa's home. Yep. We just accepted a bid to get the work started in the spring, and then we'll be moving forward in coming years to do the entire river.
Yeah, my thought is just increasing the depth by a lot.
Well, the problem with increasing depth is that, as you mentioned, our groundwater is really high. So if we dig deeper, we just get into groundwater. And that's not storage that's available for us for flooding. You actually have to create your flood storage in an area that doesn't flood, because that's where you can hold it. That's the area that will actually be available during a storm event.
Yeah,
Yep.
sounds like a good idea.
Yep. And we those are areas that we can definitely evaluate. The difficulty is always coming up with land and whether it's in the right location. And as you can see, you know, when Oregon was formed, it formed around the low-lying areas. And, you know, there are projects that can happen over time where communities have bought out homes. I know of about, I think it was a $75 or $80 million project down in the city of Dubuque, Iowa, that involved reestablishing a large drainage channel and a very large detention pond. And I think that required the purchasing of over 100 homes. Don't quote me on that number, but I remember it was a very large number of homes. And we're talking about a very large amount of money. So it's a good question. This next question is a little vague, but I think I know what they're asking. It says, what does your gut tell you and what do you believe? My gut tells me I felt safe enough in this room that I didn't have to put myself next to the door. But, you know, my gut tells me that what Bob is talking about, long term, what I see in the trends, what I see regionally, is something that, you know, we are not alone. We're dealing with this. When Mike Grace, our administrator, and I met in early 2018 to discuss the bike path and what do we need to do about the bike path, and we talked with some of the original designers, and they said, oh, we always figured it would flood for maybe a week or so here or there, and then it would recede. And we said, let's wait and see, because you want, especially when you're entrusted with public funds, you want to make sure that you're making the right decision, and you're not doing a knee-jerk type of reaction by just spending money just because something happens to happen once or twice. And so we really wanted to evaluate what's the long-term solution to that. And what we've watched ever since is it just gets higher and higher and higher. My gut tells me, and I think, Bob, you said this very well, this is a new normal. This is the new normal of what we're dealing with. Now, we could enter another climate trend where it would maybe look drought for a couple of years, but I think over a time we're going to continue to see what we're seeing, especially if we're not changing how we're handling what we're putting into the environment. So I think hopefully maybe the other 3% will get on board eventually with that. But and what do I believe? I believe that we can make improvements. I believe that it will take time. I will believe that we have a phenomenal village board, and I'm not just saying that because they're my bosses, and some of them are in the room. But no, we have a great village board that is dedicated to funding some of these projects, and I do believe we're moving in the right direction. But I also know that things take time and projects take time, and we need to be able to make sure that we're evaluating them thoroughly to make sure that we're being the best stewards with public funds.
Just want to add briefly on that. I think one of the challenges too is, because of the trends, is trying to figure out what the 100-year normal, 100-year event is, what the 50-year, 10-year event is. That's a challenge for engineers, I know, because as you go forward, you have to have accurate estimates on that in order to build. So I think that's kind of a concern that I have, that that engineers can in fact reflect climate change in their planning correctly.
And that is something that we're researching at the county level right now. We're actually working with the university, the climatologists, and engineering at UW-Madison to try to come up with better storm distributions that better represent what we're seeing. And then we can put that into place for regulations moving forward.
All right, next question is from Jamie White. Where is Jamie in the audience? Okay, so Jamie, go ahead. Lisa's going to bring the microphone up, and I'll let you ask your question.
Sorry, I've lost my voice, so
That's fine.
we'll see if you guys can hear. I'm curious what the village and surrounding areas are doing to create like a comprehensive water plan. I live on Jefferson Street, so I was one of the residents involved in all of that. And the village worked with the drainage board, and it went really well. But leading up to it, the village didn't know that the drainage board existed. The drainage board was not aware that any retention ponds were here or that new water was coming into our stream. So work hadn't been done on it for 100 years. So what can be done to help prevent that or situations like that in the future with new development coming in, especially if things are going to be pumped into the newly dredged Badfish Creek and the culverts and stuff to make sure that everything there is up to standards for this water.
Right. Great question. The plans, I mean, I don't think right now we have any major, like, a definitive, like sometimes communities have a park plan and it's focused strictly on parks. Some will have, a definitive plan on stormwater and that type of thing. I want to say that we are pretty laser focused right now on stormwater and looking at everything from that perspective. We've got I just want to say in 2018, we're spending about $100,000 on that new pipeline, so that's part of that project. And then in next year's budget, we have $300,000 allocated for stormwater improvements. Now, those projects are not, some of those are like what I showed you on this exhibit here. These are possible projects. But what we're doing is we're working with our engineers in kind of a plan for what is the best solution. Again, I don't want to just go out and solve a problem, say for one area of the village today, only to find out that it causes more of a problem for someone else. And that's very tricky when you're dealing with water. And we see that sometimes in, say, someone may install a sump pump and then they discharge it to their backyard because that's a natural spot for it. And now all of a sudden, their downhill neighbor sump pump starts running all the time. And so we have to be kind of cautious of what we're doing there. I think we're looking at options. If we are going to do a street reconstruction project, we're going to evaluate if we need to look at not only improving the storm sewers in those areas, but actually providing a dedicated storm sewer connections for all the homes along that area. And if we were doing that in the lower lying areas of the village, we would be adding that as part of the project. And that's going to be a cost, but it's going to be money well spent. Because what happens with the sump pumps, in the middle of winter, they have to go somewhere. And we do allow them, with permission from my office, to discharge into the sanitary sewer. When it goes into the sanitary sewer, guess who's paying to have it treated? Everybody here that's a resident, and so, and not only that, but it takes capacity away from your wastewater treatment plant. And that's very expensive to increase the capacity in a wastewater treatment plant. So we're looking at it saying, and I've been very impressed with this village board. I've worked with them now for 4 years. I've been impressed that they're not afraid to do the right thing. And the right thing is not always the cheapest thing to do. In fact, it's rarely the cheapest thing to do. So, it's been fun as an engineer and as a public works director to be able to be doing these projects, knowing that we're doing the right thing for the long term. And we just ask for your trust as we do that. So, is there a follow-up kind of?
Yeah,
There's a. Jamie, does that answer your question, by the way? Okay, thank you.
We need to make an ordinance as to where homeowners can disperse their sub pumps. Like out front, not into the backyard, 6 to 12 inches away from somebody else's lot line.
I agree with you. Yep. I agree with you. Our ordinances need to address that. When I started looking into our sump pump ordinance, or what our ordinances say about sump pumps and sump pump discharges, it doesn't say a lot. And the reason it doesn't say a lot is because we haven't experienced these problems. If you look historically, 40 years ago, I mean, you look at where these homes, the homes that were built on Florida Avenue were built on high and dry ground at a time. But that land is now marsh, and the only thing that's changed is our environment, basically.
How long is it gonna take to change it?
To change the ordinance?
Yeah.
I think we could commit to try to change that within a year to 2 years.
That's funny.
I'd love to say it can be quicker. I mean, the speed of government sometimes there's a lot of things going on, and we are working with a lot of things, but
I get that, but
Yeah.
my problem is that I'm the type of neighbor that I'll take on your problem if you ask me to, but, or I'll help you, but I will not create a problem for you.
Right,
And I just think that's rude
yeah.
and not so friendly of a neighbor to just think, well, I'll just pump my water to you.
Right, right. I agree. I will commit to looking at that over the next year, and hopefully we can implement something in the next year to under 2 years.
Would that
So-
be new, Jeff, or would the people that are doing that right now be grandfathered in?
I'm sorry.
Would that be new, or would it be grandfathered? I mean, the people that have the issues right now, would those be grandfathered in? Because that would be a new ordinance? Because, I mean, when people talked about sump pump water going onto their properties, there was a half a dozen people that are like shaking their head and going, yep.
Correct,
So
correct.
now all of a sudden, you as a village are gonna have 100 people knocking on your door saying, come out and look at mine, come out and look at mine, come out and look at mine. I mean, you were nice enough to come out and look at mine, said that it could be a spring. It's coming across my golf course, it's coming across my business. And we can see where the water's coming out, and the only time it comes out is when it's really wet.
Right.
And
So
if they're gonna be grandfathered in, that doesn't fix my problem.
I can't tell you right now. Obviously, if we're looking at what we're going to do, first thing we're going to do is we're going to rely on what other communities have done. We don't want to rewrite 100% of the code just because when other communities have done similar things. It's very typical. We did this when we were looking at bees and chickens, and we're continuing to work on those. That's something we started a year or so ago, and that kind of stopped. Elise is going to learn a lot in the next couple of months about bees and chickens, and we'll probably be evaluating that in ordinances, revisions, and updates. No, but what I'm saying is those are things that we've had to look at, and when we started the process of that, the first thing we did was look at other communities. So we'll be looking at a lot of options. Draft ordinances will be brought before Village Board and the Public Works for review and discussion. I always invite people to sign up for the e-notify, which is on our village website. When you sign up for e-notify, you get an email that tells you what's on the agenda and links to the agenda. You can get a look and see what's coming up on the Plan Commission agendas and be able to then come to these meetings and provide that comment and that feedback. But for this meeting, I mean, we're not going to talk about details of a future ordinance, but yes, I know I've talked to a lot of you about sump pump discharges before, and I would love to have more of a framework, because right now there's not a lot that I can tell people to change, when it's happening in their backyards. Okay, next person to talk, Hans? Yep, so up here.
Hi. First of all, I want to commend you, Jeff, and the board for holding this forum and for obviously taking this problem very seriously and doing a lot of research into it. It's not going to be an easy thing to solve. There is no silver bullet, and I would hope that there aren't many citizens who are just getting irate at anyone expecting a quick fix. I think it's important to look at where people first built in this community, because they showed quite a bit of common sense. They built on higher grounds. A lot of the more recent problems and problems that may arise on the east side of Main Street, along by the elementary schools. If things get a lot wetter, we're just going to have more problems there. A lot of that stuff got built on low land, which the first developers didn't use. But I think the board and other people are cognizant that we shouldn't do any more development there. It strikes me that there's a lot of things people in this room could do on the mitigation side and also on the alleviation side. So we talk about development. We have a choice between developing out and developing up. Developing up does not increase impervious surface. It makes things a lot more walkable, which reduces our carbon footprint associated with driving. Unfortunately, right now, it's almost impossible to go from single-family areas into multifamily, multi-level mixed use. And I think we have to get serious about that and stop having a stranglehold as we see in so many areas. If we're going to grow, we have to accept growth instead of pretending we can just freeze single-family development forever. Obviously, the whole world is changing, and we just can't freeze things in time. The bottom line is we drive too much, we fly too much, we heat too much, we cool too much, we plow too much snow, we mow too much grass. We burn ridiculous, far more fossil fuel than we really need to do to feed, clothe, and shelter ourselves. And these are things where we haven't begun to get serious as the greatest generation did during World War II. They got serious about things. They got serious about rationing their use of resources. And we have to look at this situation we're in right now as that serious. Speaking of driving, we have a transit system in Oregon already right now. It's called school buses, but it's very underutilized because so many parents are driving kids to school and kids driving to school. We could do something about that tomorrow. It would mean giving some things up, but at the way we're going, we're going to give what we're looking at 150 years from now, it's going to be a lot worse. And last thing I want to say, second to last thing is maybe we should give up on the bike trail being a continuous thing and instead focus on getting biking conditions along Netherwood safe for all the people who live along there, because hardly anybody lives along the bike trail, whereas a lot of people live along Netherwood, and a lot of people don't feel safe riding there. The problem isn't the road, it's the behavior of drivers. And I think we need to work with the town of Oregon, but we should get serious about getting safe bicycling and safe walking conditions out along there, so people like John back here would feel safe walking into town for his groceries. And lastly, if this many people showed up in this room and said, let's get public transit going to the city of Madison so that we're not all driving to Madison one at a time, the board would take it seriously. I've been making noise about it for years. It's going to take a lot more than just one screwball like me to do it. So let's get serious about that and let the board know. If you think I'm right, contact members of the board and say, let's get going on this, because they need to hear from lots of you.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Hans. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. Next question is here, and I apologize if I'm trying to get all of the words here. Where do we have to get the water to the Mississippi, and what can we do to increase something that can be moved? Gene?
What can we do?
Thank you. Sorry.
Obviously, we have to get the water out of here.
Correct.
And so it doesn't do any good to just stick it in the pond. We've got to get it out of here. So
Correct.
what can we do to get it out of here, and what can we do to increase the volume of water that we can get out of here? We have to reduce the size of Lake Barney, obviously, don't we?
Correct.
And
Exactly.
so what can we do to do that?
Well, that's what is going to be evaluated. So let's just address it from two perspectives. One is Bad Fish Creek, and we did a great project with the drainage district on that. I invite people to I don't invite people to go on private property, but you can go on Florida Avenue, the Florida Avenue Park area there, and look at some of the dredging that was done, and some of the water levels back there is a great improvement. And if we can get that up to Netherwood Road, that will be a great improvement as well. I'm very optimistic about that. Long-term wise, we're working with City of Fitchburg. That's part of the City of Fitchburg study, is to look at what types of things long-term can be managed with Lake Barney and what can be done. I know Tom is working with Tom, one of the residents up there, who's greatly affected by the Lake Barney area, is working with City of Fitchburg and the village in possible long-term options. And that could be a pipeline, it could be a ditch, it could be something else. But we as a village need to evaluate again to make sure we're not creating any downstream problems. But we also need to make sure that it's of size enough that can actually be an impact. If we just put a straw in Lake Barney and start draining it today, it's going to do nothing. When you look at, we actually made a cut in the bike path out there to be able to help it flow out, into the village, because it was being questioned of whether we were impounding it. And we wanted to do the right thing there, So we made a cut. That has flowed continuously for 18 months, continuously. At its peak was probably flowing, I don't want to even throw an estimate, but I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands of gallons a minute. We were running a 2,000 gallon minute pump across Netherwood Road, and we were falling behind continually. So we're talking about an enormous amount of water. That would be a very large pipeline, and that would be extremely expensive. And those are the things that we're evaluating. Again, I think all of us here at the table are looking at the long term. I think maybe in the past there might have been more of a short term. It's one of these things, if you don't have the problem in your backyard, you're probably not as concerned about it. And that's probably been what you've seen in climate change too. For many years, people were saying, oh, that's just, that was just a bad dry year in California. Now, how many years do we hear about fires every single year in California? That didn't used to happen. And so that's, yes, exactly. We'll send the water that way. So, okay, thank you. All right. So, Gene, thank you very much for that. All right, so I want to stay with these. Wish to speak. Todd and Michelle? Where are you? Okay, in the back there.
Well, first, you were talking about the carbon footprint, and I'm wondering why the state of Wisconsin is still burning coal.
That's for you. Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, only 10% of the electricity produced in Wisconsin is from renewables. 90% is still coal or natural gas, which is taking over some of that. But natural gas is not the answer either. It emits methane. It's a political question. It's if you look around Wisconsin at neighboring states, it's a different story. They're much more progressive in addressing eliminating the coal-fired plants and going quicker to wind and solar. So that's a question to ask your state legislature.
I have. The other thing is we live on Park Street, and like he was talking about with 8 inches of ice on our street and stuff like that, we have a huge problem with water over there, and I'm wondering why we couldn't get, anything like drainage, on that street. I mean, that street is wet 365 days a year. It doesn't matter if the temperature's 100 degrees outside. We're still pumping, our sump pump's still running every 30 seconds. I mean, and we're not the only ones. I mean, the whole line of us, which they've sent letters and everything else.
I dug a trench, that ain't helping anything, makes my yard look like crap.
Yeah. There's actually, I think, behind some of the homes that are along between Brook Street and Park Street is actually a private system that's in place, that's privately owned and maintained, I believe, for stormwater discharge. And that's something that must have been done well before my time was ever here. And, those are things that I think we'll continue to evaluate. And I think
who takes care of them? And how do you get to it?
They're not, this one is, to the best of my knowledge, is not really being taken care of. I think that might have been something that was put in 30, 40 years ago, and who knows? In my tenure, there's been one that has been put in behind when the Prairie View Elementary did an expansion and redid their parking lot. There was a private one that was encountered that they added to. Several years ago, we, as Public Works, once we did the removal of the houses on Florida Avenue, we had a system put in, but Gary can talk about that a little bit. That system was, it's so shallow, and it's never really effectively worked well. We need to look at more of an engineered solution for those rather than, we can go out and put drain tile in, but may not always be the best solution.
Yeah, one other question. When you did the soccer field over, what school was that? Prairie View. when you drain tiled that, the first time, all of our neighborhood, basically, our sump pumps ran at a normal rate. I mean, and I realize that we didn't have the rain that we do now, but then they redid the soccer field over there, and all of our neighbors are running into the same thing, and that is that, and it wasn't just the increase of rainfall, because that is just the last couple of years. Before that, we were having the same issues, and you know, because you cleaned up our neighbor's mess on the streets every winter.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not familiar with what drain tile system you're talking about on which soccer field.
Big circle cement.
Okay, I'm sorry. So that's just a nomenclature thing. I apologize. That's the culvert, the large culvert that was put in. So back in 2005, I believe it was. Is that 2005?
Yeah, I think the first one was
Yeah,
like 4 or 5.
The, you know, there's a large underground culvert or pipe that runs under from Quick Trip all the way down to the police station. And that was replaced when we did the downtown area, 2008. And formerly it was a 72-inch diameter corrugated metal pipe that had failed in certain areas and was cracked and all that type of thing. And that was replaced with a 72-inch diameter concrete pipe. So.
Well, what happened after the concrete pipe thing? Supposedly, somebody had told me it cracked or something, so then you had to redo a section. That's when we had the problem start all over again.
The concrete pipe has never cracked or had any issues with it that I'm aware of. And I'm looking at our administrator who's been here for a long time as well, and he's indicating is not. So I'm not sure what that was. You know, what sometimes happens, and I'm not saying this happens everything, but one of the concerns that we're getting a lot from people along Jefferson Street is we had just done a reconstruction of Jefferson Street that 2017, okay? And then we kept getting complaints and said, well, ever since you did the street work, my sump pump's running continually. From an engineering perspective, we changed nothing other than just redo the asphalt. And, you know, so from an engineering perspective, that doesn't change the hydrologic and hydrologic conditions. I firmly believe when something like that happens, it's related to what we're getting from a precipitation standpoint and infiltration standpoint, not related to what's happening in the street. And that can be believed. I mean, you can choose to believe me or not. And, you know, earlier the question was, what does your gut tell you? As an engineer, that's sometimes what I have to go off of.
Right, but what was the second part that you did to the concrete things? I just heard
the concrete pipe?
Yes.
Yeah, we didn't do anything to the concrete pipe other. Did we change it
Right,
from the
no,
corrugated
I
metal
get
steel
that
to-
part, but there was something after you guys did it, it was working beautifully, beyond beautifully, and then I seen digging up over there again, and there was a section that was put in and replaced. And then that's when it went to,
Yeah, it got dug up 3 times since we've been here, and we've been here over 20 years.
Okay.
We also reinstalled an interceptor, sewer interceptor, that was fun.
The sewer interceptor was put in at a later date, but that would not have affected that was, yeah. I don't know. You know, Gary, can you?
No, I don't know. I don't remember touching it, no.
Yeah, so, you know, but what I will do is, I'll ask our former public works director and see if he has an idea on that as well.
Yeah,
So,
because they did massive digging there.
Yeah.
3 different times.
okay. All right, I'm gonna move on here. Thank you very much to both of you. John, you would like to, speak, John Norwell. It's in the back there.
Yeah, I had a couple questions for you, Jeff. First of all, I think one of the main things that we're talking about is short-term solutions. The ponds and the ditches around the community that connect them and that have to be maintained better, okay? There's no question about it. I was Dane County Highway Commissioner for years. We had a comprehensive plan to work with the villages and the cities, and I can tell you that has gone away. The state has fallen away. And another issue, when we talk about the group in front here, there's some old friends up there, and I can tell you, one party I don't see sitting up there with a lot of the property being in the DNR hands as well as the Department of Corrections, I don't see the state involvement, and we need to have that. This is more than a local issue. It needs to have all the communities around here involved. And the other question I had on there is the properties to the east side of Oregon right now. They're also in a drainage district. That district needs attention. That is also causing backup problems on your village property, which is adjacent to the golf course again. That needs to be dealt with. That drainage district is active. I have a letter here from Mitby in regards to Attorney Mitby who represents the drainage. You need to be involved with them, and they have to be served notice that you're doing stuff in that area. But they are willing to work with you like they did on the west side, which was very beneficial to everybody, okay?
Yep. Yeah, I agree with you. And
Also, the Highway 14 future right-of-way that's been sitting there since 1966, I believe, is blocking water leaving the village of Oregon and the town of Oregon right now. Nothing has been done with that right-of-way since 1966. Again, the state needs to be involved in that, and the State Department of Transportation. It goes into the new area that you're planning on developing over across the other side of 14, and you need to deal with that. And I'd be willing to help any way I can. I've left some additional materials here. I'll leave it with your planner here. So some of my ideas, and you need to work on this, and you need to have the state involved too. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And the fact that there is not someone from the state or Department of Corrections up here has nothing to do with them not wanting to be here. These are panelists that I selected that would be dealing with this. But yes, we've got problems all over the place.
You have elected representatives.
Correct, exactly. So, okay, thank you, John.
Jeff? So
I'm sorry.
We did, as part of one of our Lake Barney meetings, the Department of Corrections and U.S. Fish and Wildlife have kind of come on board as far as at least attending a meeting. So, and they seemed willing to work with us as part of the solution to that problem. They have problems too, budget-wise, but at least they're coming to the table. So I think that's a step in the right direction.
Okay. All right, Carol Carr. Where is Carol? Right in the back there.
Just on a local, what can we do? What could all of the people do here? What could every person do? And how could we get people to do that with an incentive? So if I had a 100-gallon water barrel.
Rain barrel, yes.
The rain barrel. What's the effect on a 4-inch rain? Will that hold it off of my roof?
Jeremy, have you done work with Dane County and the rain? Because you also talk about rain gardens as well. And so
Yes.
I think
Yes.
looking at what can individual homeowners and property owners do to help stem some of this?
Rain barrels are great. They're great for your garden because it's natural rainfall. They can't hold very much water. When you start looking at a 4-inch rain, I had a rain barrel on my house, and I think I could fill my barrel up with an 1/8 inch of rain.
Okay.
Off the roof.
Eighth inch.
Eighth of an inch of rain.
Then never mind.
But rain gardens and infiltration, pervious surfaces are all very good. Rain gardens can actually, which are just the depressional area that you allow water to pond in and infiltrate into the ground, can actually do a whole lot more.
The reason I was asking, I just came across a flyer from last spring that Madison was offering a wonderful price on rain barrels, and if they actually did more than what you say, you could work that into, maybe that's something that could be done on an Oregon basis. And if you get people to do it, then as an incentive, they could have a decrease from that tax that's eventually going to be placed on, yeah, but never mind.
Yeah, no, but I think, Carol, you raise a very good point, is there are things that we can do, you know, and collectively, one of the things, I'll just use as an example, one of the things that we deal with in municipalities is water infiltration into sanitary sewers. And sometimes one of the largest contributors to infiltration in sanitary sewers are the tiny little holes that are located on top of manholes, and we call them pick holes. Okay, and old manhole covers have pick holes, and you think of this, and they're out in the middle of the street, so they're getting rained on and everything like this, and they have these tiny little holes, and that doesn't seem like much until you may have 40,000 manholes in your community, and if they're inundated with water on a routine basis, it starts to add up. It's not the only solution. There's lots of other things to do in that situation that you try to fix things, but I think the point being that to expect the village to fix all of your problems, I think, is a little short-sighted. We have private property, and I think there's a personal responsibility that everyone has in their own property to try to help and fix those kind of things. And there's things that we can do. So I think that's a good point from that standpoint. So it's not going to hurt to have a rain barrel.
That's true. The other thing I would like to comment on their statement about where the sump pumps pump. I know you're saying that maybe they should go out to the street and the sidewalk. I walk them. I walk them in the summer. I walk them in the winter. I walk them with my dog. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
They freeze. You're walking on ice underneath snow. And in the summertime, I'm walking on that ugly green stuff that grows and kills birds and everything else because it's constant growing. So
And it gets slick too.
it's slip.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's nasty.
Yeah, thank you. So,
Right.
yeah. So,
I had something.
okay. All right, so this next question is from a resident here, and they're asking, their statement is that in the state of Florida, it's reported that the law is that you use water for the garden, to wash cars, your boat, and I think the implication there is that you're using kind of like rainwater for that, just kind of like what we were talking about. Is that pretty close, Jeff?
No, they use, it's forbidden to use like water for, it's forbidden to use, city water for that because of the floods and the overgrowth of the water. So I just thought maybe it's something we should revisit for here of how we could use the water.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Good. Sorry, wait. Okay, I'll give it a chance. Okay, very good point, Jeff. One thing that does boggle my mind, and it's been very popular in the last 10 years. I came from out west, so everyone irrigated out west because you had to. But you come out here, and I was amazed. I asked, well, why don't we have an irrigation system? And our grass still grows just fine, and it's been growing fine. But we have many, many new homes that are being built, and they have irrigation systems. And in a dry year, an irrigation system is great. In a year like we've had, I can drive in certain portions of our village, and I still see irrigation systems on, and it's raining outside and everything like that. That if you irrigate on a very, very wet lawn, it's going to infiltrate, and so it just doesn't help your grass at all. It could run off, and so there is, again, some personal responsibility in maybe turning off your system. I don't think anyone would have had to water this last year. What?
How about a fine or a ticket for it?
Well, we don't have that in our ordinances, and yeah, I mean that's some. I mean there are some out west in the ordinances they have there. They have odd and even watering days, and there it's really more of a fact that the water systems can't handle the huge demand if everyone turns on their water all at once. The people that irrigate their lawns are paying for that water, so it's not coming out as an extra cost. But again, maybe if we increased the rates of irrigation water, things would change significantly. We'd probably make more money in the utility if we did that, but I think that's a great idea.
Jeff, I think that some education to homeowners in that regard might be a good idea. Because, yeah, there's no reason why irrigation systems can't be programmed. They're on computers, you know, that they can be programmed correctly to not water after it's just rained. And yeah, I see that a lot too. So, but I think there's some homeowners that just don't realize the issues they're creating in that regard.
Okay. This next question, and then we'll have a little bit of time, and then we'll be wrapping up here at 7. And I will say that I'll stick around. I'd be happy to talk with any of you and answer questions as long as you would like. And welcome any of the panelists too if they can. And I'll wrap up here just with some comments here in just a second. But the last written question I have is, where does Badfish Creek go? Do you downhill? Mike, do you or I mean, the Badfish Creek, you know, is part of the Yahar River water chain, and this is the actual Badfish. This is off the slide. This is off a slide from the city of Fitchburg. You can see that the Badfish Creek watershed is 53, almost 54,000 acres of land, and 79 miles of streams and rivers, 21.8 acres of lake, and 3,800 acres of wetlands. This little red dot here, this little red star here is Lake Barney. So, you know, really what we're looking at when you look at my exhibit of what's tributary to Lake Barney is just a shred of that. It was, I think, what did I say, 40, what do I have in my exhibit here is 40 some odd. 4,500, thank you, Michelle. 4,500 acres. And, you know, whereas the entire watershed for Badfish Creek is almost 54,000 acres. It eventually discharges into the Yahar River, which eventually, obviously, everything drains to the Mississippi, right? Eventually. The one thing that we were talking about earlier, and Jeremy, maybe you have a comment on this. I drove down to Janesville a couple weeks ago, and it was still light at that time, and I was amazed at the height of the rivers of this time of year. And now we're heading into winter, and, you know, stuff is going to fall, but it's not going to melt too much. But the rivers and lakes are very high, and we're going into a possible record winter snowfall year. I'm a little concerned where we're going to end up in the spring melt.
Well, it's definitely a concern, and usually we try to use the winter months to get our water levels down. So if we get a high precipitation season, it's not going to be very good.
Yeah, it's yeah. So it's definitely a concern we have and stuff. So, okay. Sorry.
A couple things that came to my mind as we're discussing all this. Number one is, are any of our homes still having lead pipes? And I know that we want to try to be environmentally better. So can you address our recycling program, and how is the village doing in getting any profits or proceeds back from that program?
Well, I'll just answer this very quickly because I want to stay on the water and stormwater things. Yes, we're addressing lead pipes, and we're actually being that's Governor Tony Evers' initiative for water quality is definitely putting that at a forefront. We're having to increase our testing right now, and whenever we do roadways, we do require people to change out their lead services. And as far as recycling, we work with Pelletary. I would entertain you to go to the Pelletary website and kind of look at, there's a fantastic 7-minute video we just watched at the village board last week that is all on recycling. It's fascinating to see the equipment that it separates this single sort recycling into the different waste streams and that. But when we receive a recycling credit every year, our staff, Sue and our staff in the front office do a fantastic job in making sure we get that credit and everything. So
the credits from the state, not the military.
From the state, yes. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, from the state.
Yes, yes, exactly. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this up just in the essence of time and keeping things with the panelists here. I'm going to stick around. We have the exhibits on board. I'd be happy to answer any kind of questions, you know, and any of staff here would be happy to ask questions. I'd personally like to just thank Mike, Jeremy, and Bob. I know, I mean, Bob, you were supposed to be on the news tonight, right?
Skip the 6 o'clock. So.
Yes, so nobody tell his boss where he was. But I do.
Channel 27's here.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Michelle's going to rat him out. So, but I do. I just want to thank the panelists. I want to thank our village board. I think, you know, it'd be foolish of us to say we're where we want to be. I think but we're moving in the right direction. Always feel free to ask us questions. Always feel free to come to village board meetings and express concerns or support or anything. Lastly, I want to thank our public works staff. I have a staff of 13 individuals, and Gary and myself, that do work tirelessly around the clock with the village. When it came time when things flood, they seem to always flood on Friday evenings, Saturday evenings. We had pumps running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for almost 3 weeks straight, moving barricades, getting pump stuff across the road, just trying to keep things rolling. And a lot of people just they think it just happens, but these guys are going out at 2 and 3 in the morning, fueling pumps and checking things and operating equipment. We could not do that without them, and they're kind of the unsung heroes of a lot of this that kind of happens. So I want to thank them for that. So, and okay, we're going to applaud. Let's have an applaud for the leaf pickup too. That's yes, leaf and snow pickup. So definitely, thank you very much for coming out tonight. I really want to thank you for your time. I hope this has been helpful, and we always appreciate your feedback. Thanks again.